In this story, I'm going to tell you how my mother-in-law kissed my forehead at holidays and then quietly tried to steal my house. I found the forged deed months after my father-in-law died. But get this, I didn't scream or post it on social media. I built an airtight paper trail, caught her on a careless voicemail, and laid the evidence out so the family and the title company couldn't pretend it wasn't real. Stay with me, I'll show you the exact steps I used to expose her, and the moment everything she'd built to control us came crashing down. My mother-in-law pretended to be my champion for years. She kissed my forehead at holidays and called me a gem while secretly trying to steal my house. When I found the deed change buried in an old file 6 months after my father-in-law died, she smiled and said, "We only want what's best for the family." By the time I exposed her, everything she had built to control us crumbled, and I promise you the payoff was worth every sleepless night. Let me take you back to the October the rot began. I am Maya Ellison, 34, and I live in Savannah, Georgia. For the first year I married James, his mother Lorraine was a soft presence. She cooked gumbo for our first Thanksgiving, she brought me a handmade quilt when our son was born, and once she sat me on the porch and said, "You're part of this family now." I believed her, that was the trick. The veneer was flawless. She curated moments of warmth like a set designer building trust, so when the curtain dropped no one suspected the stagecraft. That autumn evening when the first crack appeared, the air smelled of magnolia and damp leaves. Lightning bugs blinked in the hedges and James had gone inside to make tea. Lorraine lingered a little too long on the swing, her knitting needles clicking like a metronome. She was practiced at being harmless. The first crack came the night she helped us refinance the house. It was presented as an act of protection. "I'm only trying to protect your future," she said, soothing and authoritative. She brought forms and suggested a meeting she'd arranged for convenience. I remember the way she folded her hands, palms flat in an imploring gesture as if pleading for trust. Later, when I asked a simple question about a clause in the paperwork, she smiled and replied, "You wouldn't understand legal things, dear." My chest tightened then, a small, hot sting of indignation that felt almost childish to admit. Who talks to someone like that? Her dismissal was a lesson, not just a slight. It taught me she saw me as small, and she intended to keep me that way. I started paying closer attention. Unbeknownst to Lorraine, I used to work with contracts years ago. I'd kept those instincts quiet when I left that life to be a mother and a teacher. It surprised me how quickly the old muscles twitched back to life when I realized a form might hide more than a clause. The next morning, she invited us to brunch and said nothing about the refinance. She was serene, sunny as a window in autumn, while I felt like a moth circling a lamp that suddenly seemed too close to flame. I told James I felt off. He shrugged and said she was being helpful. He loved his mother with a loyalty I admired. She had been his anchor after his father fell ill. I didn't press it, for now. That evening at dinner, she smiled at me as if nothing had happened, and I felt an ominous certainty. Something was wrong, and I could feel it like a bruise under my ribs. I left the table and later found myself rummaging through the box of papers my father-in-law had kept in the spare closet, a sloppy habit I developed when I needed to remember dates or warranties. It had become my nervous ritual. When I needed to feel competent, I organized. Hidden under old insurance notices, I discovered a stamped copy of a deed transfer with my name replaced by Lorraine's. I stared at the signature until the ink blurred. The script was practiced, confident, the kind you see on invitations and wills. It was hers. The clerk's stamp had been applied at a county office I knew. The date was 2 weeks after my father-in-law's funeral. I know some people will say I should have told James right away, but I needed proof before I dragged our marriage into a fight. Maybe I was wrong, but the way secrets metastasize when exposed prematurely had taught me caution. I wanted to be surgical. The pattern of poison started slowly and then tightened like a noose. Little incidents nudged at the world I had trusted, caloric, repetitive, and designed to wear me down. First incident, at our neighborhood meeting, Lorraine praised me to my face. "Maya's so organized, she's keeping our neighborhood list." And then a minute later when we were alone, she said, "You should keep quiet about those things. Some men don't like their wives showing off." The compliment dissolved into a private barb. Her public kindness erased the cut she had just given. Second incident, at my son's school fundraiser, she announced to a circle of parents that we had decided to delay renovations and implied I was irresponsible with money. James didn't defend me, he looked embarrassed and walked away to talk to a neighbor. I felt the heat of humiliation on my neck and the slow sinking of dignity. Third incident, the moment that made my lungs empty was the signing day with the title company. Lorraine arrived with a calm, practiced smile and presented what she called final copies. The notary asked if everyone present recognized the signatures. James nodded before I finished looking. A neighbor who had helped our family when my father-in-law was sick stood in the doorway and watched without speaking. He later told me he heard Lorraine on the phone boasting about solving the house situation while my husband was in another room. My heart felt hollow. I remember the metallic taste of panic. I couldn't scream. I smiled and said, "Everything's fine," even though inside I was thinking they stole our home on paper right in front of me. That was March 9th at 3:12 p.m. I remember the clock on the wall because it was ticking like a countdown. For 2 days I did nothing visible. I sat on the porch and watched the gulls, feeling too stunned to act. The house, which had always felt like a warm, breathing thing, suddenly seemed mapped with hidden doorways and whispering shadows. Then an old instinct woke. Document work had been my side job a decade ago. I taught myself to read the fine print. I combed the deed again and noticed a tiny clerk's stamp from a county office Lorraine had no reason to access. I smelled a thread and began to pull. The silent witnesses haunted me: James's cousins who smiled at family gatherings, the neighbor who took Lorraine's calls, the mortgage broker who claimed everything was in order. They had all seen pieces and said nothing. I felt betrayed not only by Lorraine but by everyone who let her speak for us. That heartbreak pushed something fierce into me. I could feel the old steadiness reasserting. The woman who once read contracts for clients reassembled herself in my hands. I found my first real break when a voicemail accidentally saved on our old home phone surfaced. Lorraine's voice, clear as a bell, telling someone the paperwork is ready, we just have to make sure Maya's slow to notice. It was a stupid, careless whisper from a woman who thought she had rehearsed every lie. It was cloying, intimate proof. I listened to it alone in the kitchen late one night, the house hushed except for the refrigerator's low hum, and felt the air change in my lungs. I could have marched straight to the county and screamed, or I could gather an unassailable case. I chose the latter because there are rewards to precision: humiliation, legal consequence, and the sweet, slow work of watching an architect of deceit lose her foundation. Over the next 6 weeks, I worked quietly. I went back to the file boxes and found a trail of transactions: bank transfers from my father-in-law's account into Lorraine's account days before his death, an unsigned older will in a desk drawer that named my husband and me as beneficiaries, and emails from a notary that showed requests for rushed signings. Each discovery felt like a scalpel, careful and deliberate. I tracked county stamps and found one that matched the one on Lorraine's forged deed. I enlisted an unexpected ally. Rosa, the neighbor who was usually reserved, came forward and gave a copy of a text where Lorraine joked, "We have the house now, easy." Rosa's message arrived in the soft fog of early morning. She confessed she'd been afraid and felt selfish for staying silent. A retired paralegal friend I once helped with a community workshop agreed to look at the documents and confirmed several forgeries. She sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, turning pages, her brow knitting as she whispered, "This is deliberate. This is criminal." Preparing to confront her, I felt a slow build from despair to cold, focused determination. I cataloged everything: timestamps, bank routing numbers, notary names, witnesses, and the sequence of phone calls. I typed an email with every document attached and sent it to every family member and the title company at once, putting the truth where it could not be spun. I wanted the family to see the evidence first. I wanted to watch their faces before the rumor mill could remix the story. I could have gone public on social media and let the town weigh in, but public spectacle can be messy. It corrodes memories and blinds people. I wanted the truth to be undeniable. Some of my relatives said I should have gone to the police immediately, others praised me for trying to keep it private. My hands shook when the meeting day arrived, but my voice did not. We gathered in the old sunroom where Lorraine always did her best welcoming. The light there was forgiving, and she had arranged cushions to catch compliments. I handed the title company woman the deed copies and said, "This deed is not legitimate. These bank transfers should have been noticed." Lorraine's mouth tightened. She tilted her head like someone listening to a song she did not recognize. At first she said, "This paperwork is confusing, there must be a mistake." Then when Rosa played the saved voicemail and the notary confirmed the forged signature on speakerphone, the color drained from her face. Her practiced composure faltered. She tried to rewrite the story. "I was only helping the family," she said, voice pitched with an attempt at wounded innocence. But the paper trail, the text message, the notary, and the bank timestamp transfers spoke louder than any excuse. James stood frozen. He had to choose where to put his feet. Some cousins instinctively reached to soothe Lorraine, others stared at her with an accumulation of long-suppressed doubt. My neighbor, the same one who had once brewed me emergency tea when my son had a fever, said, "You lied, Lorraine, we heard you." The room shifted. The title company froze the transfer and opened an investigation. The county recorder flagged the deed for review. Lorraine's calls to friends turned into silence. She found fewer people returning her texts. The family conversation changed from "What did Maya do?" to "Why did Lorraine do this?" In the weeks after, Lorraine faced legal scrutiny and social exile within the family. She hired an attorney, but the evidence made her options narrow. A settlement was reached. The forged deed was reversed, restitution ordered for the unauthorized transfers, and Lorraine agreed to limited, supervised visits with family members. Walking away from that day, I felt a mix of exhaustion and an odd, bright relief, like stepping out of wet clothes into the sun. I walked away without bloodshed, without the melodrama she had hoped to stage. My life after that month felt surreal and quiet in a good way. I moved forward with boundaries and with people who stayed. I told James I needed time to rebuild trust. He chose counseling, and slowly he started attending. Some people say I should have forgiven her the moment she apologized. Others say I was right to demand legal accountability. I decided to keep my distance for now and let time decide whether reconciliation is possible. I still wonder if I was too hard or not hard enough. Looking back, I see one clear lesson: family is not just the people who share your name, it is the people who keep their promises when you are vulnerable. Lorraine is still in town, but she no longer sits at the head of the table. She became a figure people whisper about at church, a cautionary tale for those who confuse affection with ownership. I sit with my son in our kitchen on Sunday mornings, and when he laughs, I know I reclaimed more than a house, I reclaimed safety. Some nights I still wake in the dark and count the small betrayals like tally marks on the wall. The truth is this: the rot began in October, but it took months of patient, quiet work to uproot it. And when the final piece fell, when the county recorder stamped the reversal and the title company admitted their error, I felt the kind of exhaustion that comes after an all night battle, not because I had fought with violence, but because I had wrestled with betrayal and won. This story is not just about property or about a cunning woman who thought she could rewrite our lives. It's about the slow realization that trust, once broken, requires both a mirror and a map to find its way back. My map was documentation, witnesses, and a stubborn refusal to be gaslit into silence. My mirror was the quiet afternoons on the porch where I let myself feel afraid and then turned that fear into work. If you ask what I would tell someone who suspects a similar betrayal, I would say, keep calm, gather proof, and don't be afraid to let the family see the truth. Truth, when presented with care, is a blade that can cut the most carefully woven lies. And sometimes, reclaiming your life means watching someone who once held power over you lose the audience they so desperately stole.